Trevor's still there.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call today's committee of the whole meeting for January 14th to order. Before we get started, I'd like to read that the town of Hinton respectfully acknowledges that it is located on the First Peoples traditional lands. We recognize this traditional territory to show respect and understanding to those who walk this land since time immemorial. Today, we uphold our ongoing responsibility to work together in the spirit of the intent of the treaties with all the First Peoples and nations that call this place home. The town expresses gratitude for the opportunity to build a better community on these sacred lands for generations to come. And with that, we'll call the meeting to order. First order of business is adoption of the agenda. Council, are there any changes to the agenda? None. Administration, any changes?
No changes.
Had a question regarding. Councilor Race.
I'd like to move to adopt the agenda for January 14th, 2025.
Okay, thank you. Committee, there is a motion to adopt the agenda. Any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll call to question that committee adopt the agenda as presented. Please vote now. And Councillor Taylor is voting in favor by hand, and that's carried unanimously. So we'll move on. First agenda item, citizens minute with council. Minute with council provides an opportunity where residents can address council regarding issues, events, celebrations, or concerns. To ensure a constructive and welcoming environment, please adhere to the following guidelines. Keep your remarks concise, limited to 1 minute. Address the chair of the meeting when speaking to council. Avoid asking questions as this is not a Q&A session. Maintain a respectful tone and language. Stevie Campbell, is anyone registered for minute with council today?
There's no one registered.
Okay, moving on, reports from administration. Item 4.1, Crown land rates. Dale?
Thank you, Chair. So this item is in response to our technical plan item to pursue opportunities to fast track Crown land acquisition in town. So going into the document attached, starting on really page 8 of the package. What this talks about is number one, the challenges being that we have a lot of Crown land in the town of Hinton. The process that has to be undertaken in order to take that Crown land offline into privately held land for any kind of development is a very lengthy process. It can take probably on average right now about 18 months. It was over 2 years depending on land titles, but right in around what we're told now about an 18-month process. So the challenge there is that by having an 18-month process, really any development on these lands is scared away before it actually starts, just due to those timelines and all of the uncertainties that are built into that process for taking Crown land offline. So so understanding that challenge, council's directed us to look at some possible options or a possible option on how we could mitigate that concern. What we've come up with is that the town would approach, and this does require ministerial approval because this completely bypasses the regular process. But what we're proposing as an advocacy topic is that the town of Hinton approaches the province, and for $1, we are given rights to that parcel of land. We as the town are able to go through the regulatory process that normally accompanies a Crown land disposition process. That might be the duty to consult, that could be creating a survey plan, identifying any protective notations or dispositions or sensitive areas that might come along with that parcel. Once we have done that and gone through some of the legwork proactively on this land, we will have the right we'll have the right to this land and the right to sell it Once we sell it, what we're proposing here is that we remit 80% of the market value of that parcel back to the province. We retain 20% really for our time and expenses of marketing that parcel. Our main position in this advocacy document is that Crown land does not really belong in urban municipalities, that urban municipalities are developed for growth and developed for, and the purpose of them is for growth, for development. You know, the Crown land outside of our boundaries might be a different story, but that is, that's what we're looking at doing, and our ability to market some of these parcels without the risk of the upfront capital. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, CEO Nessa, Councillor Taylor, and then Councillor Race.
Are you proposing to do this with all Crown land in the town boundary? Or specific pieces?
Through the chair, you know, what our proposal is if the province is going to agree to undertake this process, that we would come back to them with specific parcels that we wanted to do with it. Or that we wanted to, for it to go through that process.
Your follow-up?
My suggestion would be to start to put an example in there so they can think about it a little more better. And my example would be the part of the golf course, you know, that's in Crown land. Because there's something that potentially could get sold that is a Crown land lease. Might be another better chunk of land, but if you put an example that they could wrap their head around an example, I think that would help better, that would help this package better.
Okay.
That's my suggestion.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Race.
Thank you, sir. So when you talk about readiness, does, would that include the utilities or the infrastructure into that, parcel to make it more desirable?
Through the chair, the intent. Our purpose is to go through more of the regulatory process, but not to actually. Put up the upfront capital and to service it unless we decide that that's more advantageous to do. So we can decide to do that. But what we're proposing here is that we're going through the disposition process. Only, and obviously whoever comes in and is going to purchase that parcel, they're gonna have to go through the regular development process, so they're gonna have to. Submit the engineering drawings on how they're going to service it and, you know, do off-site and on-site development and all types of things. We're not, what we're proposing here is not that we're going to go and pay the upfront capital to service it unless for some reason we believe that. That parcel makes it more beneficial.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Race, and myself next. I was just wondering, do we have a current inventory of Crown land that's within town boundaries?
Yeah, through the chair we do.
Do we know how, just a rough number of land area?
I don't have a total Crown land area. We could get that probably relatively easy through our GIS system.
Okay, I'm only asking, it's kind of a follow-up to Councillor Taylor's question about whether it would be certain parcels or all of it. And my thought was if it's not a huge land area, maybe it would be worth paying the $1 an acre fee and getting control of all of it. So if an interested party comes forward unexpectedly, we could start negotiations on development of the property right away without having to go back to the province.
Through the chair, we could, the one problem might be the scale of doing that, because each parcel you're going to have to look into specifically on what water body crossings are there, notations specifically on that property for maybe a, you know, a sensitive species, the consultation. I think we can do that on a more broad term because you're just changing the ownership, but each parcel might require something a little bit different and specific work. And the other thing is when we looked at the Crown lands, we determined that we don't have actually a lot of Crown land that's really conducive for development. Well, I would say low cost development. but most of the crown lands that we have would have some pretty big servicing hurdles that they would have to get around. There's a few parcels that we thought would make some sense. But I think that, you know, specifically right in around the highway bypass type area, all of that is crown land, so there's quite a bit. But the servicing challenges would be, would pretty drastically limit how many people would be interested in the parcels, so. We certainly could look at it as a whole, but we would have to probably talk with the province of what they would require us to do in order to get it to a certain stage, and maybe we can't do all the regulatory work on the all of the crown land, but maybe we have a standing agreement for all of it, or some work done in that regard. Even if it's just, for example, Indigenous consultation. But the protected notations and the specifics of the parcel will be left to whoever is interested in buying it.
Thank you for that. Mitty, any other comments or questions? Councilor David?
My only other thought is, the key benefits. Regarding growth and trying to grow the town, and just the way you explained it. It's not explained that way here, so when you read this, you get kind of confused as to why these guys are doing it. So yeah, I think you could work on that. Explain it, almost the way you just explained it right here, if that was put in here. That's my take, why are these guys doing this? That would be my suggestion.
Thank you, Councilor Taylor. Mitty? Councilor Taylor?
Is Rebecca Schultz the right minister? Seems like an odd minister to pick for this.
Through the chair, Rebecca Schultz would be the one responsible for the crown lands, but I imagine that this, you know, in order to get buy-in, this will be many more ministers. It wasn't a matter of just listing all the ministers that this might touch, but, you know, certainly economic development, I'm sure to some degree, transportation would have to buy into it. But we just wanted to, we identified, we'll say, the primary minister.
Go ahead.
Not a follow-up, a new question.
No, that's fine. No one else is in queue. Go ahead.
The 20% rationale, is that like a standard thing? I mean, I like the idea, but again, is that the way these things work? Or is that just something we came up with?
No, through the chair to the rest of council. There isn't really any science behind that number. To say there's really no template for this, because this is a very unique and novel approach that, to my understanding, has never been done before. So that number could be anything of what we want to pitch. The rationale for 20% is a number that we thought could recoup at least our out-of-pocket expenses and possibly a little bit of staff time, depending on looking at a parcel and its value. But one that we thought was low enough that the government of Alberta would agree to. Because typically all of the money, 100% goes to the province, but we wanted to look at a number or a cut of the proceeds. So that number could be anything. We can, that's up to council's discretion.
The rationale you're missing then would be the rationale as to why the 20% would be good for them. Got why it's good for us. So why it could be good for them is that we're going to a fair bit of effort to help them make their land sellable. We're sort of almost an upfront sales agent for them. We're looking for good chunks of land to help them sell, and ultimately they'll receive the majority of the benefit. Anyways,
Yeah.
You don't have to put it in and stuff.
Yeah.
I put that in myself, but.
Thank you, Councilor Taylor, Councilor Chambers, and then Councilor Rice.
Thank you through the chair to administration. So essentially, this is what we feel is fair and reasonable based on our assumptions of the process. And we would expect that potentially the province could come back and negotiate a completely different split or different things as time goes on, depending what happens as it runs through various ministries. Is that a fair assumption? This is our pitch. And negotiation would trail on theoretically.
Yeah, through the chair, I don't think. Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is, like I said, there's nothing standard about this approach. This is something completely new and different, so we have a lot of flexibility to pitch a, you know, a process that we think will work for us. But when we looked at it and just on the 80-20 split as an example, if we're looking at a parcel. That they determine the value of, say, 400,000, that would be 80,000, which would, you know, any surveying costs, any, you know, studies that we may have to do. We figured that it would be, you know, that would go pretty far into making us whole again. Obviously, each parcel will be a little bit different depending on the work that has to go into it. And maybe the first parcel or the first time we enter into this process, we determine that this number is either a little bit rich or a little bit lean, depending on how much work we have to put into it, but it was a starting point.
Thank you, Councillor Rice.
Sure, so, it sounds like we're just, you know, figuring this out and taking a look at how we're gonna proceed. But have you given thought to if the parcel is 400,000 and it cost us 100,000 just to get this going? And now we're down, do a split, an 80-20 split on that 300. So the total cost of the property. Part of that would go to pay for what, the work that we had to do. So just do an 80-20 split on what's left after we get back, you know, how much money we put out.
Or
Is that an option?
through the chair, yeah, we certainly can.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Rice. I had myself in queue and I wanted to go back to something I said earlier. I misspoke. I said it was $1 an acre. I was going with my memory, which was obviously faulty. Can you explain the nominal fee of $1? Is it $1 per parcel, $1 per acre, $1 for all of it?
No, through the chair. Our proposal is just $1 for the parcel. Whatever parcel we decide to obtain, it's $1.
So I'm gonna follow up on my question from earlier then. If it's $1 per parcel, that makes it even more viable to take ad hoc ownership of all the crown land in town. I'm just wondering if, in the event that proposal comes forward for development on a piece of property that the town hadn't considered to be developable, say it's on the outskirts and it's way away from any servicing, but the proponent doesn't require servicing. For example, they want to think of a lay down or something like that. If we don't actually have title transferred from the crown, that would take that proposal more or less off the table. It'd be the same situation that we're in now. Is that correct?
Yes.
So would it make sense then to take over all of the crown parcels within town limits? But not do the diligence at the time that we take over, do the diligence at the time that the proponent comes forward. And then that's when we could do the regulatory diligence and would that make sense?
Yeah. Through the chair. It does, but I think it starts to erode the case of why we started down. Why we did this in the first place, because the idea is that we would do the regulatory process proactively. So to save the timeline for any developer or investor that might come down and want to do it. So by waiting until they approach us to do the regulatory process. You know, we can do it and we can probably. We may be able to do it a little bit quicker, but I don't think that we're going to save enough time. I think you still run into the same problems by not doing it proactively as we're running into now with the provincial processes. You still got to go through all of those regulatory processes that they take a lot of time.
So correct me if I'm wrong, that I thought that I had heard that transfer of the land was the part that was taking 18 months to 2 years. Through land titles, and if that part was already off the table, we could jump right into the regulatory diligence. As soon as somebody expressed interest.
Sorry, through the chair. Land titles is going to provide some delay. I would imagine that would be in the 3-month mark. But the rest of it, the primary is going to be the regulatory process.
Okay.
It's the time to do all the studies that the government deems necessary. Consultation, all of those types of things, surveying, for example.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor.
Why couldn't somebody just buy the land straight from the provincial government? I know you can do that.
Through the chair, they can, there's a dedicated process to do it. It's just the timelines of from pre-application to actually taking title is about 18 months.
For provincial,
But yeah,
and our timelines, if once we take it over, will be,
through the chair. We don't know for sure what our timelines will be because it'll depend on at what stage do we want to go up to, because there may be a lot of requirements to do. For example, certain studies on crossings, but until we have a detailed plan, we may or may not need to do it. So I think it's a business decision how far we go with the regulatory process. But the goal here is that we know all crown land transfers need to go through certain processes, and that we can, that by doing that proactively, we can take that time away from the transfer process. So we don't know exactly how much time we're going to shave off with that, but I would imagine that we're going to shave off close to a year, 14 months.
Councillor Taylor. Okay, Mayor Histon and then Councillor Grace.
Thank you. Through the chair to administration, I want to build on what Councillor Stashik was talking about potentially taking an opportunity to grab all of the crown lands in town now. I know we don't have a listing of the crown land today, but we do have quite a bit of crown land in town. These parcels they're broken out in different parcels separated by different parts of our communities. It's not one contiguous piece of crown land. But I'd like to just get some clarification on our public safety system currently. As I understand it, with especially encampments, a growing problem in our community right now, we're policing encampments through bylaw enforcement on town-owned properties. But on crown land that's within the town boundary, that's still the provincial responsibility. RCMP and conservation is taking care of that currently with no cost to the town. Is that correct and accurate?
Yeah, through the chair, that's correct. So it's public lands that are going, and conservation that are going to enforce really anything that happens on the property.
And with this proposal, the dollar for the exchange, once we gave over that dollar in exchange, we would then be responsible for that crown land that policing, I would assume. Is that correct?
Yeah, through the chair, yes, I would think of it similar to our road system, where we may not own it, but we'd be in care and control and we have certain responsibilities and rights to it. Until we actually sell it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Grace.
Thank you, sir. So it sounds like it's gonna take a lot of time. To do our due diligence. Would we be contracting this out or utilizing our own staff? To do all these checks?
Through the chair to members of council, it's gonna be a mixture of both. A lot of, likely a lot of studies would need to be done in order for the transfer. Those studies are gonna be contracted out, things like the, again, consultation process, that would be done in-house. All of the filings and all of the applications would likely be done in-house.
Councillor Grace. Maybe I don't have anyone else in queue. Any comments or questions?
through the chair of administration, I'd like to thank administration for this report. I think that moving forward on our crown land is important. I would like to see this come back to council, but at this point, I'm interested in seeing a change to those numbers. I don't think an 80-20 split is where we should start our recommendation. I'd like to suggest 60-40 with the province. And politically, I'd like to sell that 40% on, we need to improve some of our infrastructure to get this development off the ground as well. And I think right now with the province, especially with the recovery in the community next door, and us, I think we've got a lot of alignment in terms of wanting to get some development going, wanting to increase tourism, increase housing, increase industry, economic development. I think there's a lot of solid arguments for benefit on all sides with the province here. Personally, I'm also not interested in acquiring all of the crown land in town all at once. I think that will bring on a number of costs that the municipality just does not need to take on. So when this comes back, I would be very interested in seeing a listing of the crown land resources that are in town. So I'm gonna put a consensus out there. The committee referred the briefing document on crown land readiness to a future committee of the whole to include a listing of the potential crown land assets in town. Thank you.
Interesting. Just making sure that's captured.
The chair, if I could, is that including the amendment to the 60-40?
Yes, we could include them in the 64, yes, so that's captured.
Councilor Taylor?
Yeah, the listing of the land, I agree with you. That's kind of what's missing here. You put some specificity to this. Just a general document without any sort of examples or anything. Good idea.
Thank you, Councilor Taylor. I do want to give Ms. Lee Campbell some assistance, to make sure to capture all of that.
As amended, and to include a list of available ground.
That's good.
Let's just get it captured first. And did you want to include the 60-40 split, or did you want that to be a separate motion, or?
Well, the 60-40 split, I figured was met in the as amended. It's the only thing we suggested as amendment at this point, and the CAO has captured that, but if the chair thinks we need to clear that up a little bit more, I'm okay with that, and it is coming back to a committee of the whole, so.
I read that as the amendment was to include a list of available crown land,
Oh, yes,
so.
as amended. To include a list of available, land, okay, and a 60-40 split.
Very good question.
Well, so we're doing this to speed up the process for how to sell land in town. Do we care if we do that? Or if provincial government just comes up with a expedited process for how to sell ground land within town boundaries, we don't care either way, do we? They both do the same thing.
Through the chair, I think the whole goal is to speed up the process. So yeah, if they wanted to go through.
If they can come up with a process that works quicker, and then say that one that the Yellowhead County is doing for that secret 2,000 acre $6 million parcel. Or if we do this, we don't care. Okay.
That's correct. Yeah, through the chair. The only thing to keep in mind, because we did look at what an expedited process would be. The only problem is that would be very difficult for the province to do. We thought that we had a better chance of doing this because it maintains the regulatory process. That a lot of it is built into the legislation that these things need to happen. Sometimes it's provincial, sometimes it's federal legislation. So the province wouldn't be able to say, wash their hands of it, they could organize the ministry to process these more effectively, but the surveys and the work still needs to be done on the process side, so I think they could, I think there's work to be done on their end to make this happen a little bit quicker. But the major steps and the thing that's going to take up the bulk of the time is the requirements. So I don't know if they'll be able to shave a lot of time.
I had myself next to speak to that. I mean, I think it'd be great if the province could come up with a way to expedite it. I'm not sure they could expedite it to the point where where it would be just as fast as if the town was acting as the purchaser and doing all the diligence and getting all the regulatory approvals. So when a purchaser comes, it's basically from the town's perspective, develop it ready for that purchaser. I'm not sure how the province could be able to expedite it to get it to that point as quickly. It'd be great if they could though. Councilor Grace?
Thank you, sir. So will this conversation end up on Minister MacGyver's desk? Because at ALMA, we had a meeting with Minister MacGyver and talked about, you know, purchasing crown land and how difficult it was, and do you remember, you know, he seemed very interested in this and the red tape involved, but I can't remember, you know, exactly what he did say.
Through the chair, we can go to any ministry. This isn't, you know, this may touch, Minister MacGyver's portfolio, just because if we are successful in doing this, I imagine that this would be probably a model for other communities to follow if they do have crown land, but most urban communities don't have a lot of crown land within their boundaries. We're a little bit unique in that regard, but it certainly could hit Mr. MacGyver's desk as well. The only thing, if I could just add one more thing, Chair, is the other thing to mention is that this also gives us or not only the provincial process, but this also allows us, if we decide to get a start on the municipal processes as well. So depending on where it is and if we want certain development, it allows us to be a little bit more proactive and possibly rezoning. And we'll say area structure plan amendments, municipal development plan amendments. That process also takes time and that's legislated. So we're also able to be proactive on the municipal regulatory framework as well.
Councilor Reese, Councilor Taylor?
No, to me, it makes more sense that we would do this versus the provincial government, because they have no local land staff that can do this. Any sales are usually handled by them.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the minister knows that. So it would get lost in the priorities in Edmonton. Your high priority lands in Hinton, right?
Yeah.
What happened with that?
Councilor Taylor? Okay, lady, you have a action request, any other comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll call the action request to. Request that, or seek consensus that committee refer the briefing document to a future committee of the whole meeting as amended to include a list of available crown land and a 60-40 split. Betty, if you could please vote now. I can't see the results. There's myself, Councilor Taylor, and Councilor Hollis voted in favor by hand. So that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Councilor Taylor.
Have you had a conversation with the lands director on this?
Through the chair, Councilor Taylor, yeah, as a heads up on talking about the process.
Okay. Who's that?
The local.
No, not local, no,
Oh.
they don't handle any of that stuff.
No, not to the ADM.
The director, that would be Edmonton.
No, we have.
The lands guy here, no. That would be my recommendation, that's conversation with the director.
Councilor Taylor. internet connection back. Okay, is there anything further regarding the current land readiness? None, we will move on to reporting, council reports. Across the table with Councilor Race.
Thank you, sir. I have nothing to report other than this week I have a arch meeting, Hinton youth meeting and a community meetings. That's it.
Thank you, Councilor Race. Councilor Chambers.
Nothing previous to report, but do have a Hinton Historical Society meeting.
Thank you. Councilor Taylor.
Oh, nothing to report. There's only one committee.
Okay, for myself, I have nothing to report. Councilor Haas.
Nothing to report for me. Thank you.
You're missing.
I have nothing to report this week.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to Chief Administrative Officer reporting and status report, December operating highlights, which were included in our package. Anything you wanted to touch on, CDL?
To the chair, no, nothing else, but if there are any questions, we'll be happy to answer.
Okay, committee, are there any questions regarding the December operating highlights report?
I think I have a view here.
Councilor Taylor?
When was the hot pump ordered? 4 to 6 weeks for delivery. When was it ordered?
Through the chair, that's the hot tub.
The one that makes the bubbles. So we don't have to make our own.
I'll refer that to Mr. McLaughlin, looks like.
Yeah, I don't have an exact date, but I know they went there and troubleshooted it, was ordering it quickly after they tore it apart, knew the impeller was correcting it, so that would have been just after Christmas sometime. Should be soon.
Okay. Is that a part that regularly breaks?
This was the second time it failed, and it had to do, we believe it had to do with restricting the air loss through the pump, but we have problem solved it. We have come up with ways to solve that issue, so that doesn't happen again.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Taylor. Councilor Race.
Thank you, sir. Admin, could you speak to, it's on page 10 of 14, the Bhutan lands, life leases?
Sure, through the chair, is there anything specific that you'd like to know about it? But as of right now, the plans that we come forward, I believe we have that slated for January 28th to come forward and the next steps and the next pieces of information and decisions that we'll need to make when it comes to the Bhutan lands. And that would be looking at a conceptual design, costing and different elements like that on the 28th.
So what is a life lease? I know you're bringing it to us, but
We'll, we provided a report on it, but really it's just a model. It's a model for owning units that the equity stays with the units. So it's almost like fixed costs as when you buy it and when you leave. So a way of just keeping the costing down. It's probably not a great explanation. There's a lot of nuance to that, but if you would like, I can send you that out report.
not like if you pay 100,000, you'll sell 100,000. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Race, my apologies for missing. I missed you in the queue. You're missing, and then Councilor Taylor.
Mine's on the same topic effectively, so thank you, administration, great to hear, we're gonna hear about life leases on January 28th. I have a question on the last page, you mentioned that we received and approved the layout for the provincial seniors housing project. When might we be able to see what that layout looks like on council?
Through the chair, I'll pass that on to Mr. McLaughlin.
I think you nailed it too.
That's great,
Send it to you that way.
thank you very much, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Taylor. Any other question about this matter too?
No, about the CAO's reports.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
When's an appropriate time to ask the AUMA for a update on our advocacy stuff? So we know that something's happening. It's only been like 3 or 4 months now. Particularly the provincial fire committee.
Through the chair to members of council, I don't know the frequency, but they come out with, advocacy updates. So all of the resolutions that they do, they come out with somewhat of a report card and a status update on a regular basis. I don't know if that's quarterly, semi-annual or annual, but I know they come out with those report cards. So I could take a look at that and see, but they usually do that proactively.
Well, at least the fire committee thing seems like something that we would want to be asking them personally about and trying to push. Perhaps through the mayor, in light of the fire seasons we've been having. Asking them what's going on. That sort of thing, that'd be my suggestion.
Awareness, and you have some input, or is this?
Yeah, no, actually, it was directly to Councillor Taylor's question. I don't know when AUMA is gonna get back to us on the advocacy that we just did at the fall caucus. However, today we got an email from AUMA looking for feedback as a survey on their advocacy. So if you're concerned about AUMA's advocacy, there's a survey in our inboxes as councillors. You can go on there, I did it today, there's lots of room to put in that feedback. And if you're concerned about a specific item, they've got some comments in there as well. And my experience with them is they've been very responsive.
Thank you. Good, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah,
Maybe any other questions regarding the December report? Okay, nothing else for that, we will move on, we do have a closed session item tonight, if somebody wanted to make a petition. There's reading a text from Council Ross that he's having issues. If somebody wanted to make a motion, Councilor Race?
Yeah, move to go into closed session.
Okay, there's a motion to go into closed session, any comments or questions? None of council could please vote now. And we lost Councilor Ross, I think is very still.
You voted.
We did vote, now, okay, it's carried unanimously, so we will go into closed session with a 5-minute break.